Serious. People who have found human remains, murder scenes or other suspicious scenes. What happened? Attention. Serious. Tag notice asterisk, jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted, in asterisk asterisk any asterisk comment, parent or child. Asterisk parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Asterisk report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. Asterisk I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit. Message, compose, to equals, r, AskReddit, if you have any questions or concerns. Asterisk. I was visiting my grandfather one summer day in Hoboken, NJ back in the late 50s and went for a walk along the piers jutting into the Hudson River and found the body of a dead man floating in the water near Holland America Line's Pier A. I flagged down a police car. He was a Hudson County police officer. I showed him the body. He used a police phone box on a telephone pole and told me to leave. I slipped back in, hid behind a stack of pallets, and about 3 more cops came and a fire chief. Then a hook and ladder came in a fire van with a rowboat on roof racks. Before they could launch the boat, a New York City police boat arrived and they pulled the body from the river. He had swollen up, had a chain wrapped around him, and it had an automobile rim attached to it. The firemen lowered bolt cutters to the cops with a rope and the cops cut the chain. The firemen lowered a Stokes basket and the cops put the body in it. The firemen pulled it up and laid the man on the dock. Then they pulled up the chain and rim. One guy with a badge on his belt took photos of the man. An ambulance came and they loaded the body onto the stretcher, then into the ambulance, and it left. A cop put the chain and rim in the trunk of a police car. Then everyone left. That September my teacher gave us an assignment, how I spent my summer, and I wrote about the dead man. She gave me a B and wrote, "Great imagination." Seriously though, I fully believe what you're saying. I am not seeing any holes in your story. It makes sense how the police got the body out of the water and transported it to the morgue. When I was 11, my dad and I stayed the night over at his dad, my grandpa's house, one night. My grandpa had just gotten out of the hospital for something relatively minor, so that's probably why we were there. Anyway, I woke up around 4 a.m. to go use the bathroom and I noticed that there was a body in the tub. I woke my dad up and told him several times until he understood what I was saying, and then he ran to the bathroom and bent over the tub. I listened as my dad made some guttural animalistic moaning sounds that were the most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I understood that my grandpa was dead, he shot himself, but I hadn't learned about suicide yet. I thought that there was a murderer in the house and that he was going to kill us next. It's been over 20 years, but I can still tell you the episode of Fairly Odd Parents I watched before going to bed and the nightmare I had immediately before waking up that night. Edit. The episode was the one where they go to the skate park. Hex Games. Damn, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you know if the suicide was related to the hospital stay? I don't know what the hospital stay was for, but I remember everyone insisting that it was very routine. My parents eventually told me that the medication he received from the hospital probably made him suicidal, but I think they were just trying to answer me and assuage my confusion. The truth is, the more I learned about him, the more I learned he was angry and an alcoholic and a bigot, and he once co-ed my grandma. I think he might have been a miserable person, and sometimes that plus alcohol plus time is all it takes. Last psychological meds I was on, I asked my doctor for sleeping meds. Actually, didn't ask, she prescribed because my sleep habits were that bad. Over the last 3 years we've tried a couple anti-anxiety and anti-depression meds. So she prescribed my sleepy pills and I go on with life, but 2 weeks in, I get emotional. 3 weeks in, I'm easily agitated and sad at every turn, so I look into my meds and find she has prescribed me an antidepressant. Clear instructions say it will take 6 weeks to be fully effective, and I've been down that road before, so I have patience. 4 weeks in, I'm getting in trouble at work because the episodes I was having that morning were so bad and I could never stop crying long enough to fix my makeup and go in on time. It took me 7 hours to get to work that day. Next week, I'm nothing but a bucket of tears, but they never tell you about how those thoughts of suicide hit so hard. I couldn't sleep for 72 hours straight. I spent 60 hours easily just crying. I thought of killing myself seriously and didn't want to because I'm a mom. But the thoughts kept coming stronger and more seriously than ever, not because of the medication, but to escape the misery of my sadness caused by the medication. I don't own guns, so I couldn't shoot myself in the face. I didn't want to fuck up my organs if I failed offing myself with pills. I'd done it when I was younger on a past attempt. I'm afraid of heights, so I didn't know where would be a good place to jump. If any of those options were convenient, I would probably not be writing this. I sent a help message to a friend, then flushed all my pills down the toilet thinking of my kid. My friend showed up 2 weeks later. I was so happy to be almost normal again. Just my experience with meds. I hope it finds you with love and gives you closure. Maybe knowing your grandpa understood you'd be taken care of ultimately. I was a chef for a while and lots of people come and go. One place I worked had a basement. There was an office, storage, walk-in fridges and freezers, time clock, bathroom. It was cool in the summer. Good place to take a quick break. During a dinner rush, one of my guys ran down to use the bathroom. We were busy, so you don't exactly go unnoticed when you're not there. 5 minutes go by. Then 10. Where the fuck is he? The first thought that comes to mind. Pooping. You don't poop during dinner. Rule 1. Second thought. He left. That's common during rushes. Everyone has their breaking point. We've had people just walk out. Not this guy though. So I ran down when there was a little lull. When the dining room is full and all the orders come in at the same time and people don't leave the tables, you can have a line of 20 people waiting for tables, and just the way it flows, you're not cooking anything. Everybody's fed until a table opens up and the new people order. I go check. Door to the bathroom is locked. Not responding to knocks. Banging away. Fuck. I know what it is before we even get it open. He OD'd. That was a terrible night. I thought he was getting clean. He had a baby at home. Drugs suck. That is so sad. They really do suck. I used to manage a hotel. I once walked into a room that was supposed to have checked out and found a man who had hung himself presumably the night before. I obviously called the police, made sure the cleaning staff did not go in that room, and gave a statement once the police got there. Hotels are so busy and this all took so long that I didn't have time to react or dwell on it until the end of my shift. I parked my car and started to get out and just puked in the parking lot and began sobbing. It was bizarre. I asked for the next day off and my boss, being the asshole she was, refused, saying it wouldn't be fair to set the precedent. I was so pissed at your boss I almost accidentally downvoted you. Haha, she had that effect on people. That was a very strange time in my life. Back in college, I woke up to a text from my housemate saying, "I'm going to kill myself." I pounded at his bedroom door, frantically calculating in my head the amount of time I'd have to bring him to the hospital if he had slit his wrists or overdosed. No response, so I ran downstairs to try and get the key to his room, ended up seeing his body hanging outside the living room window. He had jumped out the window from his room on the second floor with a noose tied to the curtain rod. Realized I was far too late, because his body was already stiff and showed signs of rigor mortis. Took 3 hours before his body was cut down. Before that I'd been planning to surprise him with a vacation to his dream destination since he'd fallen on hard times. I couldn't look out of windows for months and I've been drinking heavily ever since. Watching suicide, hanging scenes in TV shows, movies makes me literally sweat buckets. There's still a lot of lingering PTSD and it remains the worst moment of my life. Please stop drinking and find someone to talk to like a therapist. Your friend wouldn't want you to suffer like this. He'd want you to move on. Take care of yourself. It's easier said than done. Believe me, he is bound to go through that stage because stuff like this literally scars your brain deeper than you can imagine. Been there. Haven't lost anyone to suicide, but I absolutely know how depression and thoughts of suicide feel like. As for you original poster, I'm genuinely fucking sorry you had to witness something as nightmare-inducing as that. If you ever need a friend to talk to, I'll be all ears. May your buddy rest in peace. Was in a McDonald's drive-thru after work around 1 a.m. I was 19. Random homeless guy with a beer in his hand walks between my car and the McDonald's and says, "Hey, there's a house on fire over there." He was muttering some other stuff, so I didn't really take his word for it. He was out of it. Drove down a neighboring street and saw smoke pouring out of a house. The roof was making popping noises, but I banged on the door and windows trying to see if anyone was inside. Ended up having to stay and write a witness report as they pulled the homeowner out onto the grass in front of me. They performed CPR for 5 to 10 minutes and the officer ended up telling me the man died. Really fucked with me at the time. Damn. I was driving up to New England for vacation a few weeks ago and passed a wreck around Rockland, NY, where they were doing CPR on a crash victim. I imagine the revival stats aren't that great in general. Second time in a month, and I've never seen that in 25 years of driving. BTW, crazy. My buddy and I were out for a trail run in the local state park when we came across a guy who hung himself. Called the cops, we were interviewed, and sent on our way. The guy's car was nearby, filled with newspapers. He was a paper delivery guy. Trail runners find the weirdest stuff, don't they? This is why I don't run with music anymore. Oh, and I'm just a runner and I find average stuff. You folks are the explorers. Try bone conduction headphones. I hate the loss of situational awareness from having earbuds in, but I like having a beat to move to. Aftershocks changed my life. Found a dead guy on my way to work. Middle of a cold winter, maybe early, mid-January in Manchester. There's a lot of old mill buildings that are used as offices, stores, pubs, etc. I was walking to work, having parked a bit far from the entrance, and I saw what I thought from a distance was 2 trash bags. As I got closer I realized it was a person, didn't think much about it, moved on. About halfway to work I realized there was no steam from breathing. I got concerned, walked back, and started loudly speaking at the person, who was non-responsive. I went into work and called 911 because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't own a cell phone at the time. This was early 2 kiloseconds. Dispatcher said some people were on the way. I went down to the closest spot and waved in a cop, then an ambulance. Said I was the person who called, lead them to the guy, asked if I could go. They determined he was dead and I went to work. I'm guessing he froze to death, not sure how he got there. He might have been homeless. I didn't get a great look at him outside of telling you adult male with dark hair. Told the cop where I worked if they needed me and went to work. Aw man, Manchester is for sure the most fucked up city I've ever lived in. My commute is 3.5 blocks and I am convinced I will find someone dead on it at some point. I got Narcan trained this year and I'm going to start carrying it so I can help the next time I see someone fully out. I'm from Pennsylvania but my friends live there. We drove up to visit. We went in a Dunkin' before we hit the road home. One of the people working there was tweaking so bad. I'm like, how the hell is this manager just ignoring this? Guess they were just used to it. I found a dead body when I was 13. The guy had hung himself from the rope swing my friend and I had made, 9 years later and still think about it every day. I sure hope you don't feel any guilt. Nothing to do with you. My dad found a human skull in a gravel pit. Called the cops, they came and got it, never heard anything else. I was a dumb kid at the time. So when he told me about it, I assumed we were going to solve a mystery. Turns out reality is way more boring. Immediately picturing yourself like Tintin solving the puzzles, interviewing suspects, being chased by baddies and getting an award from the mayor. All before dinner. +1 Tintin. I worked at a gas station and a guy accidentally popped his trunk instead of his fuel door and a lady escaped. He tried to muscle her back into the car but bystanders spooked him and he fled without her. Holy sh**t. Hope the guy is in prison. He is. Last year my mom and I came back to her and my stepdad's house. We were getting the rest of the birthday supplies we had hid because we were throwing my stepdad a surprise birthday party. My mom was letting the dogs out while I was making my way upstairs to get the rest of the supplies and my stepdad wasn't supposed to be at the house. He was in the dark stairwell and I was confused on why he was there, so I said, "Excuse me, I left something upstairs and I need to get by you." When I tried to go around him, that's when I noticed he was swinging freely and I knew right away. I grabbed the knife out of my pocket and cut him down. It was too late, he already released himself, but I still did CPR and my mom heard the loud thud and she came running in and calls 911. He took his life because he was hearing voices in his head telling him to do very unpleasant things to his family. So some may say he took the coward's way out, but I believe he made the ultimate sacrifice to save his family from himself and the demons inside. I close my eyes when I have to walk up the stairs. If I don't, I still see him hanging there. Stay strong. You are right, he was brave. Get some help. Talk to someone, it will help. Strength to you and your mum. Still something that stays with me to this day. Not suspicious, but I felt like the facility got away with negligent homicide. I worked with a new patient. I do physical therapy. She had a new hip replacement. She was young, 60. She complained of significant pain in her thigh, and was unable to do much physical therapy that day. I had asked her questions about the pain, and given the amount of time that had passed from her surgery, she was still at risk for blood clots in her legs. I had asked her if she talked to the nurse or doctor about the pain, and she said she had. I noted her pain and spoke with nursing, saying that it is possible that she had a clot, and they brushed it off as her not wanting to do therapy and was a difficult patient. I came in the next morning, early, before patients were awake, and one of the staff stopped me and told me that she had passed overnight. She was still in the room. I was not supposed to, but I went in and held her hand and told her I was sorry that I didn't push more to have her checked out. Since then I have been vocal about exactly what patients should be demanding if they have complaints that are unanswered, and make sure I document my conversations with staff clearly if a wrongful death suit would be filed. Edit. Thank you all for the support. It was pretty traumatic and weighs on my mind, especially after the loss of my dad and grandfather to medical mistakes. All I can say is be an advocate for yourself and for your loved ones. I know a lot of us are polite and don't want to be that person. But the simple fact is people know their bodies. If they are insisting something isn't right, they probably know better than you. Difficult patients, drug seekers, or just people with low thresholds for pain, discomfort shouldn't just be written off or ignored. I know this is a hard thing to do, but if possible be present when your loved ones are in the hospital or skilled nursing. You will be able to catch things that would slip through the cracks otherwise. It's been shown in studies that women in particular are really underestimated when they report pain in medical settings. I had a wisdom tooth removal and the pain suddenly became extremely severe. No one I talked to listened to me, or sent me away. Dentist wouldn't even see me because, with a laugh, it's normal to have some discomfort. I tried explaining how severe and abnormal the pain was, and no one listened to me at all. It was terrifying. After 3 days I was taken by ambulance to hospital with an infection that had gone septic. I almost died because no one would do a checkup on a wisdom tooth. OMG. Something like this happened to my sister. She had tripped, fallen, and she thought she had sprained her ankle, but the pain seemed way more intense. She went to see doc. They did no x-ray, just wrapped her foot, told her to take Advil and Elevate. 3 days go by and she's sobbing, it hurts that bad. I end up taking her to doc. I'm livid because they're acting like she's just being dramatic, it's just a sprain. Long story short, we both insist she needs an x-ray. I mean, her ankle and foot are huge at this point. Oh, hello, hold me back, her ankle was broken. I don't think I've ever yelled at a health professional, or anyone for that matter, like I did that day, not even when I was in hard labor. So my dad's previous house had a small forest in between it and a very sketchy neighborhood. We used to explore it as kids. One day, we found a fridge in the middle of the forest, nowhere near any trails or roads. It was kinda old, but definitely hadn't been there for long. It had chains wrapped around it and a padlock. We told our dad about it and brought him back to it. He confirmed with us that the fridge was just screaming sketchiness, so he contacted the police. The next morning, some cops showed up and he took them into the woods to show them the fridge, except it was gone. Apparently they could clearly see marks left by a hand truck or something that hauled it out to the closest trail and then the road. Nothing much they could do about it, just said to not go back there. The creepiest part is just that it disappeared after less than 12 hours, and only a short walk from our house. So someone could have known we'd found it, or we'd just missed them moving it. Whatever was in that fridge, they didn't want anyone finding out. I like the idea of a person coming up on the fridge and going, neat. Free fridge. Fridge. Sorry. Former leasing agent. Walked into a studio apartment to find the tenant had screwed a heavy-duty ceiling hook into a 2x4, laid it so the hook was hanging through the grating on some metal shelving, wrapped the cable from a bike lock around the hook and then around his neck and kneeled into it. He was about 6 feet away from me, back was to me when I opened the door, and he was against the left wall, the entryway being about as wide as a standard door. I went into some sort of shock, yelled hello a few times before telling the person there to view the apartment and walked them outside. I called my boss and told him what happened and he called the police for me. I then went back in. I yelled hello 2 to 3 times as I got close to him, even though at this point I could see his eyes open and lifeless. I could see his left hand tucked into the cable. I'd always wondered if that was a survival instinct or a last-minute regret. I finally touched his arm and it was like a shotgun blast back to reality. Left the apartment. The person there for the showing stayed and consoled me. Told me she'd found her mother in similar fashion. Then, the property manager came and I let him into the unit so he could confirm. Shortly thereafter, the cops came and said it was evident it was suicide and I was free to go. Friends in that building told me they'd spoke to him the night before. I've suffered with depression and suicidal ideation for most of my life and was on edge that year. It was pretty hard for me at the time and I think about that man often. Also, the woman that stayed behind to console me. That was the first showing of the day that day and I ended up having to finish out my 10-hour shift. Edit. I ultimately agreed to finish the day. The apartment was off the market for 2 weeks. I was the first person back in to show it and the first showing I entered to his family cleaning the place out. I quit real estate not too long after that. What kind of solace company makes an employee finish a shift after finding a dead body? Question mark. I work retail. Someone died holding my hand from a heart attack at 6 a.m. a few years back, and the first thing my supervisor said when I called to report it was, "Are you able to finish the shift? I don't think we have coverage." Jesus Christ? I hope you told them to fuck off and went home. That's a retail worker you're speaking to. Obviously they finished the shift. Well, yeah, of course. Who can actually afford to just miss a shift these days? When I was 12, I was cycling next to the river in my little village when a fisherman found a suitcase. Being a nosy kid, I went to have a look as he opened it. It's hard to describe that gunk I saw inside. You certainly wouldn't have known it was a person, but bones were visible. The police came and did an investigation, later found out it was the body of a 70-year-old man from a neighboring county who had disappeared a month before he had been murdered by his son, chopped up and placed into several suitcases. Only the one was found and it was nearly 50 miles away from where they had been dumped. Can't say it affected me at all, probably would now. Wow, I'm glad your 12-year-old brain bounced back. They were lucky, it was unrecognizable gunk, so they never made a mental connection with the remains in a person. Had there been visible face, hands, feet, something recognizably human, it would have more likely than not made a much stronger impact. I had been to one of the villages in East India and it had been raining like crazy for the past 1 week or so. The river next to the villages had overflowed and many houses were washed away. My family was safe because our house was on a hill. During one of these days, I was looking outside the window at the flooded river below and I saw a floating human corpse, all bloated and covered with water hyacinths. I couldn't go near the water for almost a year after that. Pages. I am getting a lot of comments saying if the person was given a water burial. No, it was not a water burial. Also, it wasn't the river Ganges. It was the Brahmaputra River which had flooded and it washed away houses and livestock. A lot of helpless people drowned. I had the misfortune of seeing one of them. Shows how few people actually know that lots of parts of East India face devastating floods everywhere, costing human lives in the hundreds. Also, water hyacinths are not beautiful flowers, they are long weedy-like plants that grow in abundance in water. And if you are not careful and swim into them, it is difficult to detangle yourself. You mean like the flowers? They probably meant the aquatic plant. I was a project manager on an irrigation project to line earthen ditches with concrete in NV. It was around 2016 that we were in a sort of remote area of the state. Anyways, the construction crew I hired to excavate a portion of the ditch came across an entire skeleton. The skeletal remains were on one of the side banks of the ditch. I mean, the entire skull and ribs were visible to everyone. I had to halt all activities and notify local PD, and the forensics crew from Reno came and retrieved the remains and performed a sweep of the area. For about a week before we could resume our project. To be honest, it was a little creepy and unnerving to see that in person. To my knowledge, it was a cold case from the 1960s. Reno mobsters from the casinos used to take people out to Indian reservations and get rid of people, because lack of law enforcement on reservations in those years. Shit like this really spooks me to think about. There's so many bodies out there waiting to be discovered. God knows if I've ever walked right past someone rotting in the ground and just didn't know about it. I was often told by locals that it was spooky at night around that area, like they felt like they were being watched. After that dark discovery, I understood what they meant and gave me chills then. Found a dead body in the woods. My friend and I were doing a little road trip and our car was having some issues, so we took it to a shop to have it looked at. It was going to be a few hours, so I suggested that we walk back in the woods a bit and look around, maybe pick some wild berries for the drive, whatever. There wasn't a trail or anything, we just walked into the forest and wandered around. I'm pretty good with directions and the forest area was small, so we weren't worried about getting lost. Anyways, we're walking around in the forest for maybe 20 minutes, when we saw a pair of shoes on the forest floor next to some plastic bags which appeared to be empty. We walk over to it and also spotted a broken pair of glasses and an ID card that looked like someone attempted to cut in half. The ID belonged to a young woman. Needless to say, we were both concerned, but also intrigued. I continue wandering around the area and looking around, and suddenly my friend abruptly puts his arm on my chest to stop me in my tracks and get my attention. He looks serious, and he's staring straight ahead. I follow his gaze and see what looks like a black trash bag with hair sticking out of the top. You could see a little bit of a scalp and a woman's brown hair sticking out. My instincts kicked in immediately, because from where we were standing it looked almost exactly like a woman's dead body had been dumped there. I remember having a god-awful feeling in my chest. My friend and I looked at each other for a second, and then we hightailed it out of there without saying a word. Once we got out of the forest we called the cops and told them everything. I still had the ID with me. We waited for the police to show up, and they asked us to lead them to the scene. We both really didn't want to go back up there, and I specifically told the cops I wanted more people to go with us, so we waited for more cop cars to arrive before heading into the forest. We got a little lost trying to trace back our steps, but we eventually found the shoes in the plastic bags. We all look around the area, and my friend and I nearly had a heart attack when we realized the woman's body was gone. No plastic bag, just nothing. It had only been maybe 45 minutes since we were last there. I remember feeling the urge to run back out of the forest because the thought of a murderer being in the area or watching us freaked me the fuck out. I did my best to hold it together, but honestly I was scared shitless. The cops could see how freaked out we were, so they believed us. We showed them where the body had been, and it looked like something heavy had been dragged several feet and then probably picked up. My friend asked if they could bring canine units or something, and they said they were already on the way. They searched the area for the rest of the day but never found anything. The forest led out onto a road, so my guess is the killer was in the area when we found the body, and after we left he picked the body back up and carried it to his vehicle and drove off, realizing it had been discovered. As far as I know they never found the killer or the body, but they did find some tools by the road that looked like they were used for torture and mutilation. I don't know much else about the story, but it's scary to think about how often this kind of thing happens and we never hear about it. Oh my god. That's so fucking creepy that the killer was in the area. Man. Your story made my heart race and my stomach drop.